The twilight air thickens with the scent of pine and damp earth, the farmhouse settling into the quiet hush of early evening. Max, the German shepherd, usually composed and serene, sits rigidly by the window, his intense gaze locked on the dark woods behind the house. His ears twitch at every subtle rustle, tail flicking with mounting unease. His breathing shifts, slower, more deliberate, signaling something unseen. Emma notices the change instantly. His usual calm demeanor is replaced by taut alertness. The wind carries faint sounds of leaves crunching, but to Emma, it feels like silence wrapped in a shadow. She calls his name gently, her voice barely above a whisper, trying to soothe his growing tension. Yet Max remains unmoved, his low growl vibrating in the stillness. The atmosphere tightens, a silent warning stirring in the depths of the forest. Emma steps forward, placing a tentative hand on Max's broad head, her fingers brushing through his thick fur. "It's nothing, Max," she murmurs, her voice tinged with both affection and unease. Her eyes scan the window but catch only swaying branches and dark silhouettes. She forces herself to believe it's a deer or a nocturnal critter, something harmless. Yet, despite her reassurances, a small knot of doubt tightens in her chest. Her own heart beats faster as she senses that Max's reaction is not typical. Her mind races with questions. Is she reading too much into it? Or is her loyal companion truly sensing danger? The comforting hum of the farmhouse seems fragile now, fragile as the trust she has in this new place and in herself. As Emma returns to her evening chores, a soft, irregular crunch echoes faintly outside, footsteps deliberate and slow, unlike the erratic sounds of the forest. Max's ears snap to attention, his whole body stiffens. He stands, hackles raised, eyes blazing with protective fire. Emma freezes mid-step, breath shallow, every sense alert. The footsteps pause, then resume, closer now, brushing against the edge of the porch. Max emits a low, guttural growl that vibrates through the quiet. The house feels suddenly smaller, vulnerable, with shadows inching in. Emma's pulse races, fear knotting tightly, as the realization sinks in that they may not be alone tonight. Emma's hands tremble as she grips the edge of the doorframe. The night's chill seeps in, prickling her skin and setting her nerves alight. Max remains steadfast at her side, every muscle coiled, eyes piercing the dark beyond the porch light. The footsteps stop abruptly, swallowed by silence as heavy as fog. Emma debates whether to step outside or retreat into the safety of the house with Jessie sleeping upstairs. Her breath clouds the air, uneven as the tension grips her chest. The wind shifts, carrying with it a scent, faint, acrid, and unfamiliar. Max snarls softly, a warning carried through the hush. The threshold becomes a battleground of courage and fear, the unknown pressing close. The stillness fractures violently as a loud crash explodes from deep within the woods. Emma startles, the flashlight jerking wildly in her hand, casting erratic beams into the darkness. Max leaps forward, barking with desperate urgency, his body taut with adrenaline. The sound, a sharp crack, like falling branches or a forceful collision, echoes ominously, stirring the dense shadows into restless movement. Emma's heart pounds as she races to the doorway, torn between flight and investigation. The air thickens with electric anticipation. Max's frantic barks morph into low growls as he peers into the abyss beyond the trees. The crash fades, leaving behind a silence that feels heavier, pregnant with unseen threats. Emma stands rooted in the doorway, breath shallow, eyes wide as she absorbs the echoing silence after the crash. Max's gaze remains fixed on the woods, tail stiff, growling low. The once familiar night now feels alien. Shadows morph into lurking figures behind every tree. The distant call of an owl is swallowed by a weighty quiet. Emma's mind spirals between denial and dread. She thinks of Jesse sleeping soundly upstairs and feels the overwhelming need to protect him, yet the house no longer feels secure. The deep bond between woman and dog tightens, the unspoken understanding that the danger is real and that Max is their sentinel against it. Steeling herself, Emma steps fully outside, the cold biting through her pajamas. Max moves immediately beside her, ears perked, muscles ready. Their breaths mingle in the cold air, visible wisps in the darkness. The night wraps around them like a shroud, the forest seemingly holding its breath. Emma's grip tightens on the flashlight, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Every crackle in the underbrush makes her flinch, yet she moves forward, trusting Max's silent guidance. The weight of fear is palpable but overridden by a fierce determination to uncover the truth, protect her son, and confront whatever lies hidden in the shadows. As they approach the tree line, the forest seems unnaturally still. Max pauses, nose twitching, ears erect, body taut with alertness. His eyes scan the darkness, reflecting faint moonlight with an eerie glow. Emma feels eyes upon them, unseen watchers lurking just beyond the reach of the flashlight's beam. The air hums with an unspoken menace. Max emits a low growl, signaling unseen danger. Emma's breath quickens as she senses that the woods themselves are alive, guarding secrets not meant to be uncovered. The thin veil between safety and peril grows thinner with every step. A flicker of movement catches Emma's eye, a shadow darting behind a tree, too swift to be a deer or small animal. Max stiffens, his gaze locking onto the same spot, lips curling in a quiet snarl. The sensation of being watched turns into palpable fear. Emma's flashlight sweeps the underbrush but finds only swaying leaves and tangled branches. The air feels charged, thick with anticipation. The distance between the known and unknown shrinks as Max growls softly, warning her of what she cannot yet see. The night seems to pulse with hidden life, secrets lurking just out of reach. Without warning, a chilling breeze sweeps through the trees, carrying with it a faint, unnatural scent, metallic, bitter. Max's body tenses, tail rigid, and a sharp bark pierces the quiet. Emma's heart leaps into her throat as the shadows ahead seem to shift, coalescing into a vague, ominous shape. The ground trembles beneath their feet, and the forest hums with an ancient, malevolent energy. Max steps protectively in front of Emma, growling louder, eyes flashing with fierce loyalty. The unseen threat reveals itself not fully, but enough to ignite primal fear and steel Emma's resolve. Emma and Max share a brief, intense moment. Her voice falters, but Max's steady presence anchors her. She reaches down, stroking his fur, feeling the warmth and strength beneath her trembling fingers. Max's eyes meet hers, calm but resolute, conveying a silent promise to stand guard no matter the cost. The bond forged through shared peril shines brighter than ever. Together, they prepare to face the encroaching darkness, understanding that their courage must be unwavering. The night holds its breath as human and dog brace for what comes next. As they stand on the edge of the woods, a soft, eerie whisper rides the wind, unintelligible yet laden with menace. Max's ears flatten briefly before snapping upright. His hackles rise, and a deep growl rumbles from his chest. Emma feels the weight of the unknown pressing upon her, a chilling prelude to a darkness yet to come. The night closes in, swallowing their figures in shadow and silence. The stage is set for the unfolding mystery, a promise of danger, discovery, and the unbreakable bond between woman and dog. The farmhouse sat bathed in the fading orange glow of sunset, shadows stretching long across the weathered porch. Inside, Max, the German shepherd, had shifted from his usual calm to tense alertness. He perched rigidly by the window, eyes locked on the dense woods beyond the yard. His ears flicked repeatedly, picking up every faint rustle, tail flicking with restrained agitation. The air carried the sharp scent of pine and wet earth, but Max's nose quivered as if detecting something else, something ominous and intangible. Emma noticed immediately. The dog's growl was low and steady, a primal warning carried in the silence. Emma approached cautiously, her hand reaching out to stroke Max's thick neck. "It's okay, boy," she whispered, voice soft but betraying a hint of doubt. The familiar comfort of his fur was grounding, yet the tension in the room was palpable. The wind rattled loose leaves outside, but Emma saw nothing beyond the dancing shadows of branches. She told herself it was just a deer or a raccoon, that Max was reacting to the strange newness of the farmhouse. Yet his unyielding stare made her question if there was more lurking beyond human sight. As Emma turned back to the kitchen, a faint crunch echoed softly from the direction of the porch steps. Max's ears snapped erect, his growl deepening into a low, warning rumble. He moved to the door, muscles taut, eyes burning with fierce protectiveness. Emma froze, breath hitching as the footsteps slowed, then stopped, swallowed by the night's growing silence. The hairs on her arms prickled. Alone with her son in this remote place, her instincts screamed to flee, yet she stood rooted, caught between fear and responsibility. Suddenly, the stillness was broken. A sharp, crashing sound from deep within the trees, as if something heavy had been knocked over. Max leapt to the door, barking furiously, his whole body shaking with adrenaline. Emma's flashlight wavered in her grasp as she struggled to steady her racing heart. The noise was abrupt, violent, and inexplicable. Outside, the wind whispered secrets through the branches, yet the woods held their silence once more, as if daring her to venture into the darkness. Emma's hand trembled as she reached for the door, the cold night air seeping through the cracked frame. Max stood firm, ears angled forward, growling low as his eyes scanned the shadowed treeline. Every instinct screamed danger, yet Emma hesitated. The distant safety of her son's bedroom beckoned, but something rooted her in place, an unspoken pact between her and Max to face the unknown together. She inhaled sharply, the scent of pine needles and wet earth filling her lungs as she prepared to step beyond the threshold. Taking a steadying breath, Emma stepped outside, the cold biting into her skin. Max padded silently beside her, muscles coiled, tail low but alert. The beam of her flashlight cut through the thickening darkness, illuminating nothing but twisted shadows and dense undergrowth. The night felt alive, watching. Emma's heartbeat echoed in her ears as she felt the weight of every rustle, every crack. Max's gaze never wavered from the dark expanse ahead, his body tense, a silent promise to protect. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches weaving a tapestry of shadows and moonlight. Max halted, nostrils flaring, ears swiveling in tight focus. Emma's breath caught as she sensed eyes upon them, unseen watchers cloaked in darkness. The forest whispered secrets on the wind, carrying the faint scent of smoke and decay. Max's growl cut through the stillness, a low warning that something was near, just beyond sight. The night deepened, a shroud of foreboding that pressed close to their skin and soul. A sudden movement, quick and shadowy, darted just beyond Emma's peripheral vision. Max stiffened instantly, teeth bared in a low snarl, eyes fixed unwaveringly. Emma swung her flashlight toward the spot, but the woods were empty save for swaying branches and whispering leaves. Her heart thundered against her ribs as the silence thickened. The forest seemed to breathe around them, pulsing with unseen life. Max's tense posture communicated what words could not. The threat was real and closing in. The breeze shifted, bringing with it an acrid, metallic scent, something unnatural and unsettling. Emma recoiled slightly, her skin crawling at the unfamiliar aroma. Max's nostrils flared, body stiffening further. A sharp bark shattered the quiet as Max lunged forward, guarding Emma like a fierce sentinel. The ground beneath them trembled faintly, a reminder of the powerful forces lurking unseen. Emma's fear sharpened to a razor's edge, but so did her resolve. There was no turning back. Max planted himself squarely between Emma and the darkness, hackles raised, eyes blazing with unwavering determination. His growls rumbled like distant thunder, a promise of defense and sacrifice. Emma placed a calming hand on his head, drawing strength from his steadfast presence. In that moment, the fierce loyalty of the dog became her anchor, the silent language of trust that no words could replace. The woods waited, tense, expectant, as human and beast prepared for what was to come. In the chilling night air, Emma and Max shared a heartbeat, hers quick and erratic, his steady and sure. She whispered reassurances, though her voice trembled. Max's eyes softened, his tail flicking once in quiet comfort. The boundary between human and animal blurred in this shared moment of vulnerability and strength. They stood together against the dark, a fragile alliance forged in fear, but tempered by unspoken love. The forest held its breath, awaiting their next move. As the wind carried a chilling whisper through the trees, Emma's skin prickled with foreboding. Max's ears flattened briefly before shooting upright, and a deep, warning growl vibrated in his chest. The ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with an ancient, malevolent rhythm. Shadows shifted, just out of clear sight, promising that the night's true danger was yet to reveal itself. Emma tightened her grip on the flashlight, feeling the weight of uncertainty press against her soul. Together, they faced the unknown, a silent pact sealed by courage, love, and the promise of a fight yet to come. The farmhouse stood quietly in the waning light of a cool autumn evening. Outside, leaves rustled with a whisper of wind, and the sky held a fading wash of pink and purple. Inside Max, the German shepherd, was anything but calm. His massive frame was rigid, muscles taut beneath his sleek fur as he pressed close to the living room window. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, fixed on the thick woods just beyond the yard. His ears twitched at every distant crack of a twig, his tail flicking with restless energy. A low growl hummed deep in his throat, soft, warning, yet filled with undeniable urgency. Emma, sitting across the room with a book, noticed the change immediately. Max's usual steady breathing had become shallow and tense. He wasn't just alert, he was unsettled. The scent of damp earth and pine needles mingled with the faint smell of smoke drifting faintly from the nearby fields. Something was off. Max's gaze didn't waver, and though Emma saw nothing but shadows, she felt the first prickling of unease settle in her chest. Emma rose quietly and moved toward Max, her footsteps soft against the worn wooden floor. She placed a gentle hand on his neck, feeling the tension ripple beneath her fingers. "It's all right, Max," she murmured, voice calm but uncertain. Her eyes met his, alert, searching, yet tinged with a hint of worry. She tried to soothe herself as much as him, whispering, "Maybe it's just the wind or a stray animal." Outside, the last light slipped behind the trees, plunging the yard into a dim, shadowed haze. The house creaked faintly, a comforting, familiar sound that tonight seemed at odds with the growing weight in the air. Emma shook her head, trying to dismiss the chill crawling up her spine. Max's ears flicked toward the door suddenly, and his growl deepened. She tightened her grip on his fur, heart quickening. Something unseen was pressing close, and Max was the first to sense it. The faint crunch of footsteps against dry leaves broke the silence, soft but deliberate, just outside the porch. Max's head snapped toward the sound, eyes narrowing, muscles coiling like a spring. His growl became a low rumble, warning sharp as it vibrated through the still air. Emma's breath hitched. She stood frozen, her mind racing. Someone, or something, was there. Max moved to the door, his body blocking the threshold as if daring whatever lurked in the dark to come closer. The footsteps paused, swallowed by the heavy night, then resumed, closer now, edging just beyond the porch steps. Emma's pulse thundered painfully in her ears. The comfort of the familiar was slipping away, replaced by raw fear. She glanced at Max, whose every hair bristled with alarm, and found in his eyes a fierce determination to protect. Without warning, a sudden crash shattered the night. The heavy slam of something tumbling through underbrush, branches snapping sharply under an unseen weight. Max barked furiously, his body tense and shaking with adrenaline. Emma's flashlight wavered in her grasp as she tried to focus on the source, the beam slicing through the darkness. The woods stood eerily silent again, shadows folding over one another, hiding whatever caused the noise. Her skin prickled with the electric thrill of fear. Max's growls rumbled like distant thunder as he pressed closer to Emma, shielding her instinctively. The peaceful night had transformed into a gauntlet of unknown threats, each one whispering a warning. Emma's mind raced, torn between running back inside and stepping forward into the murky woods. Max's unease was contagious, and she could no longer ignore the weight settling deep in her gut. They were not alone. Emma's hand hovered trembling over the door handle. The cold night air slipped in through the crack, carrying a faint scent of damp moss and something darker, more unsettling. Max stood firm beside her, body stiff, eyes locked on the woods. His low growl vibrated through the floorboards. Fear threatened to root her in place, but beneath it, a stubborn resolve took hold. She swallowed hard and glanced back toward the house, the comforting glow of the kitchen light, the sound of Jesse's distant laughter from his room. She was alone in this vast, shadowed land, but Max was by her side, a steadfast guardian. Taking a deep breath, Emma pushed the door open, stepping into the cold, into the unknown, trusting Max's silent warning more than her own faltering courage. The night air bit sharply at Emma's skin, crisp and laden with the earthy scent of pine and decay. Max moved alongside her with deliberate care, every muscle taut, senses alive. Their footsteps muffled on the soft dirt, swallowed quickly by the vast forest. The moon, half hidden behind wisps of cloud, cast ghostly light between the trees. Emma's flashlight cut a narrow path through the blackness, but the woods seemed to close in, filled with shifting shadows and whispered secrets. Max's head turned sharply toward every sound. A snapping twig, the scurry of unseen animals, and his growls punctuated the silence. Emma swallowed her fear, anchoring herself in the dog's unwavering focus. Together, they ventured deeper, bound by trust and a shared understanding of the lurking threat. The forest breathed around them, ancient and watchful. Leaves stirred with a ghostly rustle as a breeze whispered secrets through the towering trees. Emma's senses sharpened. Every shadow felt alive, every breath of wind carried a hint of danger. Max halted, nostrils flaring, eyes fixed intently ahead. His tail dropped, and his body stiffened with tension. Emma's heart pounded against her ribs as unseen eyes seemed to track their every move. A faint scent, smoke, or something far more acrid, lingered in the air. Max let out a sharp bark, then a low growl, his gaze never wavering from the dark thicket. The woods were no longer just trees and shadows. They were a labyrinth of secrets, alive with an unspoken menace. Emma's breath caught, the mystery pressing in, heavier with every step. A shadow flickered at the edge of Emma's vision, swift and fleeting. Max snapped his head toward it, teeth bared in a low snarl. His eyes blazed with a fierce light, unblinking, fixed. Emma swung her flashlight wildly, the beam slicing through the darkness to reveal only the swaying of branches and the twitching of unseen creatures. Her heartbeat thundered, breath shallow and quick. The forest pulsed with an almost sentient rhythm, each flicker of movement a reminder that they were intruders in a place where secrets waited to pounce. Max's body was taut, a coiled force ready to spring. Emma gripped his collar tightly, her own resolve hardening. Fear tangled with courage as they stood on the edge of revelation and danger. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a new scent, sharp, metallic, and unsettling. Emma's stomach tightened. She recoiled instinctively, the hair on her arms rising. Max's ears pricked, his eyes darted, searching. His growl deepened, resonating from his chest like the rumble of distant thunder. The earth beneath them seemed to pulse faintly, as if the land itself were warning them away. Emma's breath fogged in the cold air, each inhale heavy with anticipation. Her thoughts swirled. What dark force lingered in this place, woven into the soil and trees? Max's loyalty was fierce, his vigilance unyielding, and Emma realized that this night was a turning point. There was no turning back now. Max planted himself firmly between Emma and the looming darkness, his posture commanding and unyielding. His hackles rose, and his eyes blazed with an unspoken vow to defend at all costs. His low growl vibrated like a promise. No harm would come while he stood guard. Emma knelt beside him, her palm resting on his warm fur. The weight of his fierce loyalty grounded her, lending strength to her trembling limbs. Together, they faced the night, silent, united. The woods waited patiently, a looming threat just beyond the fragile barrier of light and trust they had built. In the stillness of the night, Emma and Max shared a fragile breath, the mingling of human fear and animal courage. She whispered reassurances, her voice soft but resolute. Max's eyes softened, tail flicking once in quiet acknowledgement. They were not alone in the dark, they were a team. The bond forged in this moment was unspoken but profound. Emma drew strength from Max's unwavering presence, while Max found purpose in protecting the woman who had come to mean everything. Together, they prepared for whatever lay ahead, hearts beating as one beneath the endless night sky. The wind picked up, carrying a whisper that curled like smoke through the trees. Emma's skin prickled, a shiver tracing down her spine. Max's ears flattened briefly before snapping upright, a deep growl rumbling in his chest. The earth beneath their feet trembled softly, an ancient heartbeat warning of danger yet to come. Shadows shifted just beyond the flashlight's reach, hinting at secrets waiting to be revealed. Emma tightened her grip on Max's collar, the weight of uncertainty pressing down. Together, they faced the unknown, a silent pact sealed by loyalty, love, and the promise of a fight still to come. The farmhouse settled into a heavy silence as dusk bled away the last hues of sunset. Outside, the trees cast long, shifting shadows, and the air turned crisp with the coming chill of night. Inside, Max, the German shepherd, stood motionless by the living room window, his silhouette etched against the fading light. His ears twitched sharply, catching sounds too faint for human ears. A deep, low growl rumbled from his chest, vibrating like a warning, soft but steady. Emma sat nearby, knitting by the firelight, eyes occasionally flicking to Max. He was usually calm at this hour, but tonight was different. His muscles twitched beneath his thick coat, and his tail flicked in restless beats against the hardwood floor. The familiar comfort of the old house seemed to wane beneath the weight of his unease. She noticed his eyes, alert, piercing, almost searching the dark woods beyond the yard, as if waiting for something unseen. A faint scent drifted on the breeze, damp earth mixed with a hint of smoke, faint but unmistakable. Emma's throat tightened. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Max's growl softened, his gaze shifting briefly to meet hers, conveying a silent urgency. Yet, when she glanced back toward the window, only shadows danced among the trees. Inside, a storm of uncertainty brewed. Emma's heart beat faster, conflicted between reason and the instinct whispered by her loyal companion. The once safe sanctuary now felt like a thin veil over something darker, something waiting patiently in the growing night. The following afternoon, as sunlight poured weakly through dusty windows, Emma moved about the farmhouse, tidying the living room. The comforting creak of the floorboards beneath her feet contrasted with the faint, unsettling scent that teased her senses, smoke, thin and elusive, curling like a ghost around the corners of the room. She checked the old stone fireplace, poking at the ashes, but found nothing, no smoldering embers, no signs of recent fire. Max lay near the hearth, his ears flicking nervously, nose twitching as he inhaled the air. Suddenly he stood, pacing in tight circles, his body taut and alert. His gaze locked on Emma, eyes narrowing, almost pleading. A low growl rumbled deep in his throat as if urging her to heed an invisible warning. She knelt, placing a tentative hand on his head. "What is it, Max? Can you smell something I don't?" Despite her efforts to dismiss the sensation, the smell lingered, an acrid reminder of something unseen and unspoken. Emma's mind raced. Could it be a nearby wildfire? An old, hidden ember buried beneath the forest floor? Or something more ominous tied to the land's secrets? She brushed the thought away, but Max's tense posture was a silent testament that her rational mind might be ignoring truths her instincts already sensed. Morning light spilled into the kitchen, illuminating the calm routine of a new day. But Emma's eyes caught something that sent a shiver down her spine. Her keys, which she distinctly remembered leaving on the counter, were now perched neatly on the windowsill. A glass she had set on the table was lying on the floor near the hallway, a faint ring of condensation still visible on the wood. Max sat at the foot of the stairs, ears sharply angled, eyes scanning every corner. Though silent, his tension was unmistakable, tail stiff, head tilted slightly, as if guarding against an unseen intruder. Emma's first thought was that Jessie might have knocked them over during sleep, but she quickly dismissed it. Her son was fast asleep in his room, and she had been awake for hours. Her unease deepened as Max's intense gaze locked onto the hallway, his body coiled, ready to spring. The dog's alertness was impossible to ignore. It was a silent alarm ringing louder than any noise. Emma's mind whirred with possibilities. Was it merely forgetfulness, or was something more sinister creeping through the quiet farmhouse? She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her breath, realizing that the house's comforting facade was fracturing. As night cloaked the farmhouse in shadows, Emma settled near the fireplace, the only light flickering from the flames casting dancing shapes on the walls. A faint, rhythmic sound broke the silence, soft footsteps padding over the wooden floor. She froze, listening intently. Could it be the house settling? Or her imagination playing tricks? Max's ears pricked sharply. He rose slowly, his body taut with anticipation. His eyes fixed on the hallway, muscles coiling as a low, warning growl emitted from his throat. The air thickened with tension, and Emma's skin prickled with the awareness of being watched. She stood, heart pounding, and moved toward the hallway, the footsteps fading just as she rounded the corner. The space was empty, yet the eerie stillness was heavier than before. Max remained on guard, his stance unyielding, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the doorway. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she felt the weight of invisible eyes upon her. The footsteps, whether real or spectral, had vanished, but their presence lingered like a whisper, a threat just beyond reach. Thunder rumbled distantly as a cold wind whipped through the trees, carrying with it the scent of rain and damp earth. Emma's restlessness matched the brewing storm. Suddenly, Max's sharp barks shattered the night's fragile calm. He stood rigid by the window, teeth bared, eyes blazing with fear. Emma rushed to his side, peering into the blackness beyond the yard. Nothing stirred until a deafening crash exploded from the woods. Branches snapped violently, heavy thuds shook the ground. Max lunged toward the door, his body taut with panic, refusing to be held back. Emma called out, voice trembling, "Max, come." But the dog's instincts were raw and urgent. His bark escalated into frantic howls, his eyes wild. Emma's pulse hammered against her ribs as the woods fell silent once more, the sudden quiet oppressive and unnatural. She stood frozen on the porch, torn between fear and the desperate need to protect. Max paced back and forth, low growls rumbling, hackles raised. His fierce loyalty was undeniable, a guardian ready to confront whatever darkness had breached their sanctuary. The storm's first drops fell, cold and sharp, as Emma whispered to herself, "We're not alone." The woods had gone still once more. Emma stood at the threshold, breath visible in the cold night air. Max's body remained rigid, eyes scanning the tree line, unblinking. The tension was palpable, thick as the fog beginning to settle across the yard. Emma's heart was a frantic drumbeat in her chest. The silence pressed on her, heavy and suffocating. She wanted to run inside, to retreat to the safety of walls and warmth, but something held her in place. Max, ever vigilant, slowly retreated to her side, his eyes never leaving the dark. Their shared unease was a bond beyond words, an unspoken understanding that the threat was real, that the night held secrets darker than shadows. Emma reached down, stroking Max's thick fur, grounding herself in his steady presence. But the truth settled like ice. Whatever lurked in the woods was not done with them yet. As dawn began to soften the darkness, Emma stood by the window, watching the first pale lights seep into the sky. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman torn between fear and resolve. Max lay at her feet, calm now but alert. Her mind replayed the night's events, the growls, the footsteps, the crash. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but a deeper part whispered that she had to face whatever haunted their home. Jessie was counting on her, and Max was ready to stand with her through the unknown. Emma drew a deep breath and whispered, "We face it together, Max." The dog's ears flicked, and his tail gave a faint wag, a silent promise that they were no longer alone. The morning light carried with it a fragile hope, but beneath it, the shadows of what was to come lingered, waiting. Emma sifted through a dusty box found in the attic, uncovering faded photographs and yellowed letters. Faces stared back, smiling families, children playing, shadows caught in smiles. Yet in some photos, a strange heaviness lingered, as if the smiles masked secrets too dark to face. One photo showed a group gathered near the woods, the expressions uneasy, eyes darting toward the trees. A note on the back read, "Before the disappearances." Emma's fingers trembled as she pieced together fragments of a story half forgotten by time. Max rested his head on her knee, eyes watching. His stillness was comforting, but the weight of the past settled on Emma's shoulders like a cold cloak. The mystery was older than she'd imagined, and more dangerous. Night wrapped the farmhouse in thick darkness again. Max lay by the fireplace, but his breathing was uneven, ears flicking toward distant sounds. A sudden, low growl vibrated from his throat, his body stiffening. Emma looked up from her book, heart tightening. Max's gaze fixed on the hallway, the shadowed corners beyond the light. "What do you see, boy?" she whispered. The growl deepened. Emma stood, flashlight in hand, and moved toward the source of Max's unease. The air grew colder, and the silence thickened, pressing in on her chest. Max led the way, every muscle ready for defense. A shadow flickered past the doorway. Emma's breath caught as she gripped Max's collar tighter. The unseen was close, and they weren't safe. The strain of sleepless nights and whispered dangers began to wear on Emma. She found herself retreating into herself, haunted by fear and grief. Max, sensing her vulnerability, grew more protective, positioning himself between her and every unknown sound. Their bond, once a source of comfort, became a crucible of tension. Emma struggled to accept the growing reality that the house and the woods held dangers beyond her understanding. Max's fierce loyalty was both her shield and a reminder of the threat lurking just beyond. As the days passed, Emma's internal battle intensified, torn between hope for peace and the stark truth her companions saw clearly. One afternoon, as Emma and Max walked along the edge of the property, Max suddenly stopped, ears twitching toward the dense forest. His body went rigid, eyes fixed on a point just beyond the tree line. A faint rustling broke the silence, soft, deliberate, like cautious footsteps. Emma squinted into the shadowed thicket, but saw nothing. Max growled low, the sound heavy with warning. She felt the prickling sensation of being watched, the hairs on her neck rising. The quiet menace in the air was undeniable. The forest seemed alive, holding secrets just out of reach, and Emma realized that their fight for safety was far from over. In the quiet moments before dawn, Emma sat on the porch steps, Max curled at her feet. The sky bled soft hues of pink and orange, promising a new day. Yet the weight of the past and the unknown clung to them both. Emma reached down, running her fingers through Max's thick fur. His eyes met hers, steady, loyal, unyielding. No words were spoken, but a silent understanding passed between them. They faced the coming darkness together, bound by trust and love. In that fragile moment, amidst the lingering shadows, Emma found a well of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Their journey was just beginning. The small town seemed like any other, quiet streets lined with weathered houses, friendly nods exchanged over white picket fences. But when Emma stepped into the local general store to gather supplies, the atmosphere shifted. As she browsed the aisles, a frail elderly woman muttered under her breath, barely aware of Emma's presence. "That house on the hill, it's cursed. Strange things happen there. The owners disappeared without a trace." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She turned, searching the woman's eyes, but they were clouded, distant. The words hung heavy in the air, hints of darkness beneath the town's cheerful exterior. Over the following days, similar murmurs floated from shopkeepers, neighbors, even the postman. Tales of vanished families, unexplained noises, shadows that lingered too long. Though she brushed off the gossip as superstition, the repeated warnings seeded doubt deep in Emma's mind. The house, once a symbol of hope and renewal, now cast an ominous shadow over her thoughts. Max, ever watchful, growled softly when the whispers crept too close, his silent voice warning her of a danger she could neither see nor ignore. Max's protective instincts began to intensify, threading tension through Emma's days. Passing neighbors elicited low growls from deep within his throat, his eyes narrowing whenever strangers ventured too close to the farmhouse. One afternoon, the local sheriff stopped by to check on a minor disturbance reported nearby. Approaching the porch, the sheriff extended a friendly hand, but Max stepped forward with a stiff posture, hackles raised, and a guttural growl warning the man away. Emma rushed to soothe him, whispering calming words, but Max refused to back down. His loyalty to Emma was unmistakable, yet his behavior veered into something uncomfortably fierce. More than simple protection, it felt like a warning. Stay away. Caught between pride in Max's devotion and fear of what he was sensing, Emma felt isolated. The house was no longer a sanctuary but a fortress, guarded by a creature whose vigilance seemed fueled by unseen threats. With each defensive growl, the invisible tension tightened, binding Emma's fate ever closer to Max's fierce watchfulness. Curiosity drew Emma back to the general store, seeking answers from the elderly woman who had first whispered of the house's dark past. This time, the woman spoke with reluctant clarity. "The last family, the Andersons," she said softly, eyes distant as memories flickered. "They vanished without warning. Rumors say it was something tied to the land itself. The whole town turned its back. Some things are better left forgotten." Emma pressed gently for details, but the woman's gaze hardened, and she shook her head. "You don't want to know. Just be careful, child. This place hides shadows darker than you can imagine." As Emma left the store, a cold wind brushed past her, carrying the weight of unspoken fears. The warning echoed in her mind, intertwining with Max's restless energy. The town's silence felt heavy with secrets, and Emma sensed that the answers she sought were tangled in a history the community was desperate to bury. Her resolve hardened. If danger lurked, she would face it head-on, but the price might be more than she was ready to pay. The attic was a chamber of forgotten time, filled with dusty relics and the scent of aged wood. Emma climbed the narrow stairs, searching for anything that might shed light on the farmhouse's mysteries. Beneath a mound of old blankets, she uncovered a weathered wooden box. Inside lay yellowed letters and a tattered envelope, fragile with age. Carefully unfolding a letter, Emma read hastily scrawled words hinting at tragedy. A missing child, whispered warnings, a desperate attempt to protect the family from the shadow that stalks the grounds. The letter ended abruptly, ink smudged and torn, leaving an ominous silence between the lines. Max sat nearby, ears alert, his gaze never leaving Emma. When she shivered, a soft growl rumbled from his chest, as if he too sensed the heavy truth sealed within those pages. The attic, once a place of dust and memories, now held a key to a past steeped in fear and sorrow. Emma folded the letter slowly, her heart pounding. The house was not just a home, it was a battleground of secrets, and Max's instincts were no longer inexplicable. Something ancient and malevolent had claimed this land, and they were caught in its shadow. Days passed, and Emma found herself returning to the letter's haunting words. The mention of a protective instinct resonated as she recalled Max's restless nights. His growls at empty corners, his fixated stares toward the dense woods, his refusal to stray too far from her side. One evening, Max sat rigid in the living room, eyes locked on a shadowed corner. Emma followed his gaze but saw nothing. His growl deepened, low and warning. It struck her then, Max wasn't just reacting to noises or shadows. He was guarding them against something unseen, something the letter hinted at but never named. Emma's fear intertwined with awe. Max's loyalty transcended the ordinary. His instincts were their shield, a silent language bridging the gap between the known and the unknown. As she watched him, a new understanding dawned. Their survival depended on trusting this bond, fragile yet fierce, in the face of encroaching darkness. Emma's inquiries into the town's history brought cold shoulders and whispered warnings. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid her gaze, and conversations hushed as she approached. At the grocery store, glances lingered just long enough to unsettle her. The sheriff, once approachable, became distant, offering vague reassurances that only deepened her suspicions. The community's fear was palpable, like a living barrier erected around the farmhouse's secrets. Emma felt the isolation creep in, a suffocating loneliness fueled by judgment and silence. Each unanswered question widened the gulf between her and the world she sought to belong to. Amidst this growing paranoia, Max's unwavering presence became her anchor. His vigilance was both a comfort and a reminder of the danger looming nearby. Emma wrestled with doubt. Was she chasing shadows, or was the town's collective fear a silent confession of truths too dark to face? The phone rang late one evening, cutting through the quiet like a sharp breath. Emma's heart clenched as she saw her estranged father's name flash on the screen. Hesitant, she answered. His voice was urgent, strained with worry. Emma, you need to leave the house. It's not safe for you, for Jesse. Trust me. When she pressed for answers, he grew silent, his words cryptic. There are things you don't understand. Things I wish I never knew. Max, alert in the room, growled fiercely at the sound of the call. He paced near the door, his body tense as if expecting danger to cross the threshold. Emma felt torn between a father's warning and her determination to protect her family. The weight of the unknown pressed down, thickening the air with dread. Driven by urgency, Emma dove deeper into the town's shadowed past. She connected fragmented newspaper clippings with the missing persons reports, tracing a pattern of disappearances tied to the farmhouse. The threads wove a tapestry of fear and silence, stitched together by collective denial. Max's behavior grew more purposeful, his watchful eyes guiding her toward forgotten corners of the property. One afternoon, he led Emma to an overgrown path near the woods, pausing to bark softly at a hidden entrance obscured by brambles. Emma's heart raced as she realized Max wasn't just protecting, they were uncovering a secret long buried by time and fear. Her protective instincts warred with her growing curiosity, a storm of hope and dread swirling inside her. One evening, the sheriff's deputy, previously cautious and reserved, pulled Emma aside. His voice was low, tinged with remorse. You're not wrong. The disappearances we never fully investigated. Some in town wanted it buried, afraid of what might surface. He revealed rumors of ancient rituals tied to the land, whispers of a malevolent force that had haunted the farmhouse's occupants for generations. The deputy's confession was both a relief and a new source of fear for Emma. Max growled deeply, his body bristling with warning. Emma understood then. Max's loyalty was not just to her and Jesse, but to a primal need to shield them from an evil rooted far deeper than she'd imagined. The stakes were no longer just personal, they were ancestral. Standing in the moonlit kitchen, Emma wrestled with the gravity of the truths revealed. To flee was to surrender, but to stay meant confronting shadows older than the town itself. Max's steady presence was her anchor in the storm of doubt. Her mind flashed to Jesse, innocent, unaware, yet in the eye of the coming tempest. The bond between her and Max was their strongest weapon, but it came with a price: sacrifice, courage, and a willingness to face the unknown. Her voice was barely a whisper. We fight together. As the nights darkened, Max's vigilance deepened. He patrolled the perimeter with renewed purpose, ears flicking at the slightest sound, tail stiff and raised. His eyes, gleaming in the moonlight, reflected an intelligence beyond instinct. Emma noticed his tense posture whenever the wind shifted or a shadow moved. He was both sentinel and guide, the silent guardian standing between them and the encroaching darkness. His growls became a language she learned to understand, a code of warning, protection, and fierce love. One morning, as dawn painted the sky with soft hues, Emma sat on the porch steps, Max lying close beside her. The world was quiet, the tension momentarily eased by the gentle light. She reached down, fingers brushing his fur, and met his steady gaze. In that moment, words were unnecessary, a silent pact forged in trust and love. No matter what darkness lay ahead, they would face it side by side. Max was more than a protector, he was family. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalks as Emma stepped outside, hopeful to connect with the few neighbors nearby. A middle-aged woman approached, her smile polite but eyes guarded. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, voice warm but measured. Yet, when Emma gently broached the subject of the house's history, the woman's smile faltered, her gaze darting away. "I don't rightly know much," she muttered quickly, steering the conversation toward the weather. A subtle unease hovered beneath her words, and Emma caught glimpses of others nearby, heads turning, hushed whispers trailing in her wake. It was as if the house itself cast a long, silent shadow over the community. Max, standing close at Emma's side, stiffened, ears twitching at every muted murmur. His eyes scanned the horizon, alert to tensions Emma could only sense. The friendly masks of the townspeople concealed secrets they weren't ready to share, and Emma felt the gulf widening between her desire for belonging and the cold distance of silence. At first, the sheriff had been a pillar of support, a steady presence when Emma first arrived. But lately, his demeanor shifted. During a routine visit, Emma asked pointedly about the house and its past. The sheriff hesitated, his eyes flickering away before he forced a smile. "Just old stories," he said softly. "Nothing to worry about." When Emma pressed further, his answers grew curt, evasive. "You'll find out soon enough," he warned cryptically, then changed the subject. The warmth once there cooled into a barrier. That night, Emma lay awake, replaying his words. Was he protecting her or warning her? The unease in her gut twisted tighter, matched only by Max's restless pacing below her window. The sheriff's retreat felt like a silent admission. There was more lurking beneath the surface, and Emma was caught in the middle of something bigger than she'd imagined. The phone's shrill ring shattered the evening stillness. Emma glanced at the caller ID, her estranged father. She hadn't spoken to him in years, and the sight of his name brought a wave of conflicted emotions. "Emma," his voice was low, urgent. "You need to leave. Now." "But what's wrong?" she demanded, heart pounding. His answer was vague, filled with shadows. "It's not safe there. For Jess. You don't know what you're up against." When she pressed for details, the line went dead. Max growled from the doorway, ears flat against his head, a warning Emma couldn't ignore. The dog's unease mirrored her own turmoil, her father's cryptic call a ghost from the past, pulling her into a deeper, darker mystery. Torn between the need to protect her family and the unresolved fractures of her past, Emma faced a painful choice: trust the man who'd once abandoned her, or stand her ground against an unseen threat creeping closer each day. The day a new family moved in next door, Emma watched as their small terrier yipped and snapped from behind a chain-link fence. The tiny dog's hackles rose at the sight of Max, who typically greeted new animals with calm curiosity. But Max's demeanor changed. His ears pinned back, tail stiffening as he let out a low, warning growl. The terrier's fear seemed to fuel Max's agitation, a tension Emma hadn't seen before. "What's wrong, boy?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. Max's eyes were dark pools of guarded instinct, flickering toward the woods beyond the property line. The terrier's terror wasn't just fear of a new dog, it was a palpable reaction to something invisible, something tied to Max's restless vigilance. Emma's unease deepened, wondering if the protective nature she admired in Max was rooted in a secret burden he bore alone. In the days that followed, Emma grew closer to the sheriff's deputy, a man whose quiet sympathy broke through the town's walls of silence. Over a shared cup of coffee at a dusty diner, he confided in her. There were cases, he admitted, voice low. People disappeared. Families broken. It was swept under the rug, but it wasn't natural. The land has a history. He didn't have all the answers but urged Emma to dig deeper, to listen to the whispers in the shadows. Be careful, he warned. Some truths want to stay hidden. Emma's mind raced as she connected the dots, missing persons, cryptic warnings, Max's protective behavior. The deputy's honesty was a lifeline, but it also drew her deeper into the town's dark underbelly. Her resolve solidified. For Jessie's sake, for Max's, she had to face the darkness head-on, even if it meant unraveling everything she thought she knew about home and safety. Old-timers in the town gathered on porches and in quiet corners, their voices hushed when Emma approached. Stories spilled out, whispers of disappearances, eerie rituals, and inexplicable happenings tied to the land's ancient roots. Emma sifted through old newspapers, piecing together a tapestry of fear and secrecy. The journal she had found in the attic echoed the rumors, tying the property to a legacy of sorrow and warning. Max's behavior sharpened alongside her discoveries. His eyes narrowed, his body tense as though guarding against a threat only he fully understood. The farmhouse was no longer just a place to live. It was a battleground for forces unseen. Emma felt the weight of history pressing down on her, a heavy cloak of fear and responsibility. Jessie's laughter once filled the fields around the farmhouse, but Emma noticed a shift. He began spending long hours alone in the woods, wandering the paths Max avoided. The boy's curiosity pulled him toward shadows Emma feared. Their conversations grew sparse, silences thickening the space between mother and son. Emma's worry blossomed. Was Jessie drawn into the same darkness she was battling? Was Max's vigilance enough to keep them both safe? The growing divide gnawed at her, complicating a fight already weighted with fear and uncertainty. Protecting Jessie became a desperate mission, not just from outside threats but from the secrets creeping into their lives. On a chilly evening, Emma and Max ventured near the forest's edge. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying scents both familiar and strange. Max suddenly halted, ears pricked, muscles taut. His growl was low, deliberate, an ancient warning. Emma strained her eyes into the dark, but only shifting shadows greeted her. A branch snapped, sharp and sudden. Max barked, fierce and loud, but no figure emerged. The woods seemed alive, watching, waiting. Emma's breath caught, the bond between her and Max pulsing with shared fear. Whatever lurked there was unseen but palpably close, and together they stood on the threshold of an unknown terror. The deputy's face was grim when he approached Emma under the fading twilight. "I've warned you," he said quietly. "The town buried these secrets for a reason." His eyes held a flicker of fear and resignation. "Some truths come with a price. If you keep digging, you might not like what you find." His words felt less like advice and more like a veiled threat, closing the space around Emma. Max's silent growls echoed her own rising dread. Emma understood. The battle was no longer just about discovery but survival. She had crossed a line, and the darkness was closing in fast. In the solitude of her moonlit kitchen, Emma grappled with a truth that stretched beyond her grief. The house, the town, the shadows all intertwined in a web she was only beginning to untangle. To leave meant admitting defeat, letting the past swallow them whole. To stay meant fighting a battle rooted in history, fraught with peril but bound by loyalty and love. Her gaze shifted to Max, whose steady presence was a beacon in the encroaching darkness. His fierce eyes reflected a silent promise. "We fight together," Emma whispered, voice steady despite the tremors beneath. The choice weighed heavy, but in that moment, she knew courage was not the absence of fear, but the will to stand firm despite it. Nights grew darker and longer, and Max's patrol became relentless. He moved through the shadows with purpose, ears flicking at every whisper of wind, tail stiff, eyes blazing with intent. His body tensed at the slightest disturbance, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a coyote. Each growl was a word in a language only Emma could begin to understand. Max was sentinel and guide, bridging the unseen and the known, standing guard against an ancient threat. Emma watched him, heart tightening with a mix of pride and fear. Their bond was no longer just companionship, it was a shared burden, a mutual promise etched in silent understanding. Dawn's soft light crept through the farmhouse windows as Emma sat on the porch steps, Max curled faithfully at her side. The world was quiet, fragile in its peace. Her fingers traced the familiar lines of his fur, each touch a comfort and a vow. Their eyes met, steady, unwavering. No words were needed. In that moment, a silent promise was made. Whatever darkness waited beyond, they would face it together, bound by love, loyalty, and unbreakable trust. Max was not just a protector. He was family, and in their unity lay hope. The farmhouse morning light filtered through cracked blinds, casting dusty beams across the creaky wooden floor. Max stood rigidly at the front door, muscles taut, eyes sharp, and scanning the boundary between yard and woods with an intensity Emma hadn't seen before. Usually eager to follow Jessie outside, today he refused to step past the threshold. His ears twitched in the crisp autumn air, catching sounds just beyond human hearing. His tail, normally relaxed, was stiff, a silent flag of alert. Jessie tugged impatiently at Emma's sleeve, ready for their trip to town. But Max planted himself firmly, a low growl vibrating from deep within his chest, a primal warning. Emma knelt, stroking his dense fur softly, whispering reassurances, yet Max's gaze never softened. His stance was more than protective, it was defensive, warding off an unseen presence beyond the yard. The scent of damp leaves mingled with a faint, distant musk of earth and decay from the bordering forest. Emma's breath caught. What is Max sensing that I cannot see? The silent message settled deep, chilling her more than the autumn chill. The house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a fortress besieged, with Max its steadfast guardian. Night had wrapped the farmhouse in a cloak of stillness, broken only by the soft rustling of leaves stirred by a cold, whispering breeze. Emma lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, when a faint, deliberate scratching echoed from the woods, sharp, slow, and steady, like claws dragging against bark and stone. Max shifted beside her, ears flicking upward, muscles coiled and ready. Suddenly, soft whines erupted into urgent barks. Max sprang to the window, teeth bared and gaze locked onto the dark forest beyond. The scratching persisted, crawling closer, sending icy tendrils of dread up Emma's spine. She wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders, heartbeat syncing with Max's frantic growls. "It's just an animal, Max," she whispered, voice trembling despite herself. Yet the rhythmic, unnerving scrape didn't belong to any creature she knew. It felt purposeful, as if something, or someone, circled their home, waiting. Max's fur bristled along his spine as he paced restlessly, growling low. When Emma rose to investigate, he intercepted her path, growling warningly, clear and unwavering, "Venture outside, and danger awaits." Swallowing her fear, Emma retreated to the shadows within, realizing the unseen presence was closer than ever. The basement's stale, damp air pressed heavy as Jesse's footsteps echoed softly against cracked concrete. His flashlight flickered across the wall until it landed on words scrawled unevenly in black ink. "It's still here." The message pulsed with an unseen menace, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe beneath the flickering light. A cold shiver raced down Jesse's spine. His breath hitched, voice quivering as he called, "Mum, you have to see this." Upstairs, Emma's heart twisted in response, urgency flooding her limbs as she hurried down the creaky stairs. Max was already alert, low growls rumbling from his throat as he barked fiercely at the marked wall. His stance was taut, muscles primed to defend. Emma's eyes scanned the chilling phrase, a deep unease pooling like ink in her chest. "This isn't normal," she whispered, hesitating just before touching the cryptic words. The house seemed to lean in closer, holding its breath, and even Max fell silent, eyes narrowing in fierce concentration on the shadows. Emma pulled Jessie close, murmuring reassurances she barely believed. What was once a forgotten part of their home had transformed into a chamber of dread, a physical reminder of the house's buried secrets. Max's warning had sharpened from subtle to urgent. Emma's resolve hardened. No matter the cost, the truth had to be uncovered. The night cloaked the farmhouse in suffocating silence, broken only by the wind's mournful whistle tugging at window panes. Emma sat wide-eyed, every creak and sigh amplified in the darkness. Max sat rigid beside her, ears flicking, muscles taut like a coiled spring. Outside, the woods swayed unnaturally, shadows shifting against the silver moonlight. Max's gaze remained fixed, unwavering, as if guarding against something lurking beyond perception. Emma's breath hitched, her chest tightened with an oppressive unease. This wasn't the fear she'd known before. It was primal, unyielding. The house was no sanctuary, it was a vessel for silent menace. Grief and dread collided in her mind, blurring lines between memory and present terror. For a moment, she willed herself to believe it was just the wind. But Max's posture told a different story. The unseen was real, closing in. The sheriff's deputy approached cautiously, shadows lengthening beneath his boots. Emma greeted him with tentative relief, but before words could form, Max exploded into snarls, hackles raised, teeth bared in a warning older than time. The deputy froze, hands raised in placation. "Easy, boy," Emma urged, stepping between them, voice unsteady. But Max remained immovable, a living fortress blocking any approach, low growls vibrating through the chill air. The deputy's face tightened, unease seeping in as he backed away slowly. Emma's heart sank, recognizing Max's fierce protectiveness wasn't about strangers. It was a reaction to something far darker, something the deputy couldn't perceive. Later, whispering to Jessie, Emma said, "Max knows what we don't. He's sensing danger." It wasn't mere fear, it was a primal shield, a guardian's warning against an invisible threat. The gravity of Max's silent message settled over her like gathering storm clouds. Whatever stalked them, Max was their first and last line of defense. His warning was no longer to be ignored. The morning air was sharp with the scent of fallen leaves and wet earth as Emma packed for a quick trip into town with Jessie. But as she opened the door, Max's posture shifted immediately. He planted himself firmly across the threshold, eyes locking onto hers with unyielding resolve. When Emma tried to coax him forward, a low, threatening growl rumbled from deep in his throat, a sound no dog makes without grave reason. Frustrated yet wary, Emma knelt beside him, running fingers through his fur, searching for reassurance. Max was immovable, a living barrier between her and the unknown dangers beyond the yard. Jessie's young eyes filled with confusion. "Why won't Max come with us?" Emma's heart clenched. "He's protecting us," she whispered, the weight of those words sinking deep. This was no mere instinct. It was a message, a boundary drawn firm. In that quiet moment, the line between safety and peril became clear. Max's refusal wasn't stubbornness, it was a warning. Stepping beyond meant crossing into danger. Days bled into one another as Emma withdrew further from the world. Phone calls went unanswered, visits declined, and familiar faces faded into distant shadows. The house, once a refuge, now felt like a cage tightening with every hour. Max's constant vigilance was her sole anchor, a steadfast beacon amid growing darkness. Yet even his steadfast companionship couldn't dispel the crushing loneliness pressing on Emma's chest. She sat at the window, watching neighbors pass without greeting, whispers trailing like ghosts behind them. The town's secrets built invisible walls, trapping Emma not just in fear but in silence. Her grief, once a private ache, now mingled with isolation, threatening to drown her resolve. The house hadn't only taken her husband, it seemed poised to steal the fragments of her life she fought to hold. The attic lay cloaked in dust and shadow, pale afternoon light sifting through grimy panes. Emma's fingers brushed against a worn leather trunk beneath a moth-eaten tarp. The air was thick with forgotten memories and lingering dust. Heart pounding, she lifted the heavy lid to reveal yellowed photographs, brittle letters, and an ancient box carved with strange, arcane symbols. Max sat alert nearby, low growls rumbling from his throat, ears flicking toward every creak and whisper. His sharp eyes warned her not to disturb what lay inside. Emma unfolded the letters with trembling hands. They spoke of sorrow, loss, and warnings veiled in metaphor, darkness tethered deep beneath the house's foundation. The photographs showed solemn faces, their eyes shadowed by grief, silently pleading for release. Opening the box released an eerie chill. Inside, an artifact pulsed faintly, filling the attic with a weight that pressed on Emma's soul. Max stepped protectively between Emma and the box, teeth bared in silent defiance. Swallowing hard, Emma accepted the terrible truth. This was no ordinary home. Their safety was bound to secrets older than memory, with Max as their guardian against what lurked below. Night swallowed the farmhouse in a suffocating darkness, broken only by the flickering porch light. The air crackled with tension, thick enough to taste. Suddenly, harsh scratches echoed from the woods, urgent, primal, and unnerving. Max stood at the porch's edge, barking fiercely, growls deep and guttural. Emma locked every door and window, bolts sliding into place like desperate shields. Her pulse raced as footsteps crunched over dry leaves, scraping dangerously close. Together, Emma and Max stepped into the cold night, breath misting in the frigid air. Shadows wove between the trees until she saw it, a tall, shifting figure gliding through underbrush. Max's growl morphed into a fierce bark. Frozen, Emma watched the shadow halt, and a chilling whisper floated on the wind. Her name carried like a death knell, both familiar and terrifying, seeping into her bones. Max growled louder, muscles coiling to strike, yet hesitation flickered in his eyes. The invisible line between fight and flight blurred. Emma's heart hammered. This was no ordinary intruder. This was the darkness they'd fled, finally come to claim them. The cellar's damp scent lingered in Emma's nostrils as she brushed dust from a stack of old boxes in the attic. Sunlight filtered weakly through a grimy window, casting ghostly patterns on the creaking floorboards. She pulled out yellowed newspapers, their headlines screaming about disappearances and strange phenomena shadowing the town's past. Each article felt like a whisper from a forgotten era. Reports of people vanishing without explanation, stories dismissed as mere superstition. Yet, as Emma traced the faded ink, she saw a pattern emerging, one that echoed in Max's erratic, protective behavior. She paused, holding a brittle clipping that told of a family who once lived in this very house, consumed by fear and silence. Her breath caught as the weight of the house's dark legacy pressed against her chest. The fresh start she'd craved was dissolving into a desperate need to understand what she'd truly brought home. Max's soft whine pulled her from her thoughts, his eyes searching hers as if urging her deeper into the unknown. Emma swallowed hard, the chill of dread and determination settling in equal measure. Emma's footsteps echoed faintly in the basement as she neared a locked door she had never dared approach. The air grew colder, heavy with a silence that seemed to thicken with every breath. Max's low growl rumbled beneath her feet, vibrating through the floorboards. As Emma reached for the door handle, Max stepped forward, ears pinned flat, hackles rising. His growl deepened into a guttural warning, and he planted himself squarely between Emma and the threshold, tail stiff, body taut like a drawn bow. His eyes locked on hers, silent but unmistakable. Not this way. Emma knelt, brushing his fur, whispering soft reassurances she barely believed. Yet Max did not falter. His stance was unyielding, unwavering, a fortress of instinct guarding her from whatever lurked beyond. Her heart raced with fear and awe. This was no ordinary protection. Max was warning her of a threat she couldn't yet see, a boundary she was not ready to cross. His fierce loyalty both comforted and terrified her, hinting at the darkness hidden behind the door. Summoning courage, Emma gently pried the door open, revealing a narrow, dust-choked space beneath the basement stairs. Among discarded debris, a small, leather-bound journal lay hidden in a weathered box beneath loose floorboards. Hands trembling, she unfolded brittle pages filled with cramped, hurried handwriting, the original owner's desperate chronicle. The entries told of an ancient curse cast upon the land, a malevolent force that haunted the house and its families across generations. The journal recounted ritualistic attempts to contain the darkness, candles lit in secrecy, protective charms placed at thresholds, whispered prayers against unseen eyes. One passage mentioned a guardian, an animal with the power to sense and repel evil, watching tirelessly through shadowed nights. Max, standing sentinel at her side, growled softly, eyes reflecting a knowing intelligence. His restless pacing and unyielding protectiveness suddenly fell into place. He was not merely a pet but the heir of that ancient guardianship, bound by loyalty and instinct to keep Emma and Jesse safe. Emma's breath caught, the weight of the revelation crashing down. The house's secrets were no longer legend or rumor, they were a living terror she must face, alongside the loyal companion who understood the battle that lay ahead. As Emma reread the journal's haunting passages, the fragmented puzzle began to resolve. Max's behaviors, his refusal to leave the property, his fierce protectiveness, his uncanny sensing of invisible threats, all aligned with the role of the guardian described in the writings. The author spoke of an animal chosen by fate, gifted with instinct beyond human understanding, charged with vigilance over the cursed grounds. Max's tense stance, his growls at empty corners, and his steady gaze into the woods suddenly felt less like oddities and more like purpose. Yet the journal offered no reprieve. The curse was deep-rooted, ancient, and unyielding. Protection was not a guarantee of safety but a constant battle, a fragile shield against a darkness always seeking to break through. Emma felt a strange blend of fear and relief wash over her. She was no longer alone, but the fight was far greater than she had imagined. Max was more than a companion. He was an ally in a war waged in shadows. The stakes were no longer just survival but salvation. The phone rang, sharp and unexpected, cutting through the heavy silence. Emma's heart lurched as she answered, hearing the familiar but distant voice of her estranged father. His words were urgent, coated with fear. "You have to leave, Emma. Now." When she pressed for reasons, he refused to elaborate, his voice tight with secrecy. "It's already too late. You don't know what you're dealing with." The call ended abruptly, leaving Emma suspended in a whirlpool of dread and unanswered questions. Why had he never warned her before? What secrets had he kept hidden all these years? Her thoughts tumbled, tangled with the cryptic warnings and Max's restless vigilance. A cold knot tightened in her chest. Her father's silence was as heavy as his fear, a burden she was now forced to bear alone. Days passed, and the atmosphere inside the farmhouse grew thick and oppressive. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, twisting against walls that seemed to breathe. The wind whispered through cracks, carrying faint murmurs that Emma couldn't place. Max's behavior escalated. He followed Emma like a shadow, eyes darting nervously, muscles tense as if ready to pounce. His growls echoed through empty rooms, his gaze fixed on spaces no human dared acknowledge. Emma felt the house watching, waiting, its malevolent presence palpable. The curse was no longer a distant threat but a living, breathing force closing in on them. Every creak and sigh amplified the terror tightening around her heart. She grappled with mounting dread and the desperate desire to protect Jesse. The boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred. The house was alive with a dark energy, and it was waiting for her to make a move. Late one afternoon, Max suddenly froze, ears pricked and tail rigid. His gaze locked onto a forgotten corner of the living room, where shadows pooled thick and cold. A deep, warning growl rumbled from his throat, low and menacing. Emma followed his gaze but saw nothing but empty space. The silence felt suffocating, charged with an unseen energy pressing in on her chest. Max's posture was immovable, a silent sentinel guarding against an invisible threat. She stepped closer, heart pounding, but Max remained steadfast, muscles taut and eyes unblinking. The air shifted, carrying the faintest hint of cold breath, like a whisper in the dark. Emma's fear spiked. This was no ordinary warning. Max was standing between her and something ancient, something dangerous. The bond between them was more than love. It was a lifeline. She knew that whatever lurked unseen, Max's loyalty and courage were their only defense. That evening, as the fire sputtered and cast flickering shadows, an icy chill crept through the living room. The warmth faded suddenly, and the flames winked out, plunging the space into a cold, unnatural darkness. Max's ears flicked forward, his body stiffening as he growled softly, eyes locked on the front door. The house seemed to hum with an ominous energy, every breath thick with menace. Emma rose slowly, a surge of dread tightening her throat. She felt, rather than saw, the weight of something drawing near, inevitable and unstoppable. Her gaze met Max's, understanding passing silently between them. This was the culmination of all their fears, the moment when the unseen would make itself known. She reached for her phone, but the signal was gone, cut off, like the house itself had claimed control. The decision loomed: stand and face the darkness or flee before it consumed them. The night was heavy, the air vibrating with tension. As the house seemed to pulse with a malignant force, Max positioned himself between Emma and the looming threat. His fur bristled, muscles coiled like springs ready to release. A fierce bark shattered the silence, not just a warning but a battle cry. Max's eyes burned with fierce determination, trembling with the knowledge that this might be his final stand. Emma watched, heartbreaking, as Max's stance became a shield, a living barrier against the darkness seeking to breach their sanctuary. In that moment, she understood Max's loyalty was a sacrifice beyond words. He wasn't just protecting her, he was giving everything he had, his very spirit, to keep her safe. The weight of his sacrifice settled deep in her soul, awakening a fierce resolve. She would no longer be a passive observer. Together, they would face the shadows. Max's silent courage was the catalyst for Emma's own strength, a bond forged in love, sacrifice, and unyielding loyalty. The house felt different, alive in a way Emma couldn't explain. The faint creak of floorboards seemed deliberate, a whispering echo in the stillness. As she moved through the rooms, she noticed subtle shifts. A picture frame slightly askew, a door left ajar, cold drafts slipping through walls that should have been sealed tight. Max's ears twitched, his body rigid, eyes narrowing as he fixated on corners where no human eye could detect movement. His low growls pierced the silence, warnings aimed at shadows only he could perceive. Emma's skin prickled. The sensation of being watched tightened like a noose. She caught fleeting glimpses of something out of place, darkness moving just beyond her peripheral vision, shifting shadows that disappeared when looked at directly. The house was no longer a refuge but a prison layered with secrets, alive with forces that strained the edge of reality. Her disbelief began to erode, replaced by a creeping terror she could no longer deny. Max wasn't just alert, he was desperate. The unseen forces were closing in. Max's nose twitched in the crisp air as he tugged gently on his leash, eyes glowing with an intensity that unsettled Emma. The forest had always been a place of calm, but tonight it seemed to pulse with something far older, something watching. Jessie trailed behind nervously, clutching Emma's hand. The trees loomed tall, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers against a slate-gray sky. Max pulled forward steadily, leading them down a hidden path choked with fallen leaves and gnarled roots. Emma's breath hitched as the canopy thickened, and the usual sounds of wildlife fell away, swallowed by an oppressive silence. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something. As they neared an ancient, crumbling cabin, forgotten by time and town, the air grew heavier. Max's hackles rose, his stance unwavering. Emma's heart pounded as she realized they were stepping into a place nobody in town wanted to speak of. The weight of the unknown pressed down, but she followed Max's lead, torn between fear and the desperate hope that answers lay just beyond the trees. The sheriff's deputy met Emma in hushed tones, his face shadowed by years of unsaid secrets. He slid a worn folder across the table, thick with yellow documents and faded photographs. "I've been digging," he said quietly. "There's a pattern, disappearances stretching back decades. People just vanished, like swallowed by the earth." His eyes flicked nervously toward the dark window. "The town swept it under, called it superstition. But I don't believe in coincidences anymore." Emma thumbed through the papers. Missing persons reports, cryptic notes, and mentions of a curse tied to the land. The deputy hesitated, voice dropping. "There's a legend, a darkness that haunts the house and woods. Some say it's an ancient evil bound to the earth." The weight of truth settled between them like a stone. Emma felt her disbelief wane as the deputy's unease confirmed the reality she had been running from. The legends were more than stories, they were warnings. Each day, the house seemed to tighten its grip, shadows crawling along walls like living things. The scratches at night grew louder, persistent, methodical, like claws tracing a message only Max seemed to understand. Max remained at Emma's side, eyes fierce, body tense. Even in daylight, his gaze flicked toward dark corners, nostrils flaring as if smelling something foul and unseen. His protective growls became a constant undertone, a soundtrack to the creeping dread enveloping them. Emma found herself retreating into silence, every creak amplified by fear, every gust of wind a threat. The boundaries of safety shrank, the walls no longer protected but suffocated. The whispers in the house carried voices, low, unintelligible, that stirred the hair on her arms. The darkness wasn't just absence of light. It was a presence, a predator circling, waiting. Her hope dimmed with each passing hour. The house was alive, watching and preparing. Max's steadfastness was the only light against the encroaching night. A sudden crack shattered the night's fragile calm. A noise like splintering wood echoed through the forest surrounding the house. Emma's breath caught. The earth seemed to tremble beneath her feet, subtle but undeniable. Max froze instantly, ears erect, muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. His eyes locked onto the darkened treeline, pupils dilated with primal alertness. A low, guttural growl rumbled from deep in his chest, a sound that reverberated through Emma's bones. Jessie clung to her side, wide-eyed and silent. The tremor pulsed again, faint but growing. Something massive moved beyond sight, stirring ancient fears buried in the soil. Emma's heart pounded as she realized the danger was no longer distant. It was here, awakening. Max's warning was absolute. This was a threat unlike any before, an unknown force pressing in on their fragile sanctuary. The house held its breath. In the eerie stillness, Emma stood at the threshold of the woods, the night pressing cold against her skin. Her breath came shallow and quick, her pulse a thunder in her ears. She grasped Jesse's hand, feeling his small fingers tremble in hers. The silence was a cruel lull, thick with anticipation and dread. She knew, deep in her soul, that their time was running out. The protection Max offered might not be enough. The shadows beyond the trees weren't just watching, they were preparing. Torn between the instinct to flee and the desperate need to fight, Emma faced her darkest fear, that the evil she sensed was inevitable, unstoppable. Her thoughts raced with memories, of loss, of love, of promises made but broken. And through it all, Max's unwavering presence was a beacon, a tether to hope amid despair. Her courage flickered but did not fade. The storm was coming and she would meet it head-on. Max was more than a dog now. He was Emma's shield and sword. Every muscle coiled, every movement purposeful. His eyes never left her or Jessie, darting constantly, sensing dangers invisible to human senses. He snarled softly at rustling leaves, bristled at the slightest whisper, and positioned himself between Emma and the unknown with unwavering resolve. Emma saw in Max's vigilance a reflection of her own growing determination. The bond between them transcended words. It was instinct, loyalty, and unbreakable trust. The house's oppressive energy deepened, but Max stood firm, a silent sentinel against the encroaching darkness. Guided by Max's unerring nose, Emma followed him deeper into the woods, toward the forgotten cabin whispered about in town lore. The trees here were ancient sentinels, their twisted limbs casting long shadows beneath a pale moon. They stumbled upon an abandoned campsite, charred logs, tattered tents, and strange symbols crudely carved into the bark of surrounding trees. The air was heavy with the scent of cold ash and earth turned over in haste. Emma knelt, brushing away leaves to uncover scattered journal pages, yellowed and torn. The writing spoke of a malevolent force stalking the land, a darkness that devoured hope and twisted minds. The author described rituals, desperate pleas for protection, and warnings that few survived. Max growled low, nose to the ground, eyes darting between the shadows. The campsite was no mere relic. It was a warning left by those who had encountered the evil before, those who had tried to fight and failed. Emma's heart clenched. They were standing on the edge of a legacy of fear and failure. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. As Emma clutched the journal pages, a low growl vibrated from Max's throat. His stance hardened, hackles rising as his eyes fixed unblinking on the dark tree line ahead. The ground trembled faintly once more, a crack echoing sharply through the stillness. Max's growl escalated into a fierce bark, his body moving protectively between Emma, Jessie, and the unseen threat. He refused to let them advance, standing firm as the tension mounted. Emma's breath hitched, terror mingling with fierce gratitude. Max was their final barrier, the last line between safety and the darkness. The woods held secrets, and now, confrontation was inevitable. The sun was dipping behind the ancient pines, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the uneven forest floor. Max stood rigid at Emma's side, his powerful frame taut with alertness. His ears swiveled sharply at every whisper of wind, every crack of twig. His deep chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the darkening woods with a piercing intensity. Emma felt the weight of his gaze, heavy and unyielding. Max's body language was unmistakable, a barrier forged from muscle and instinct. His low growl rumbled softly from deep within, vibrating against her chest like an unspoken promise to protect at any cost. "I feel it too, Max," Emma whispered, though the words were more to steady herself than to reassure him. The air was thick with foreboding, as if the earth itself held its breath in anticipation. His tail remained low and stiff, a silent sentinel against the unknown dangers lurking beyond the tree line. Emma's heart hammered, the fragile safety of their world unraveling. Max's stance was a warning. The storm was coming, and it would not be gentle. The woods seemed to close in around them, branches swaying in the cool breeze like ghostly fingers beckoning them deeper into the unknown. Emma's boots crunched over the thick carpet of fallen leaves, the scent of damp earth and pine resin filling the air. Max led the way, his every step deliberate and sure, eyes darting through the underbrush with acute vigilance. Jessie clung tightly to Emma's hand, his youthful curiosity dampened by the growing weight of unease settling in his chest. The shadows lengthened and thickened, the fading sunlight filtering through the canopy in fragmented shards, painting the forest floor with eerie patterns. With each step toward the old family cabin, a place shrouded in silence and whispered rumors, the air grew colder, heavier. The ground beneath their feet trembled subtly, as if warning them to turn back. Max's hackles raised, his muscles coiling, eyes locked onto the shadows ahead with an unyielding resolve. Emma swallowed hard, torn between fear and the stubborn need to follow Max's lead. The forest breathed around them, alive with ancient secrets and lurking menace. This was no longer a simple walk. It was a journey into the heart of darkness, where the past and present collided in silent, watchful tension. A cold realization settled like a stone in Emma's stomach as the deputy's absence became glaringly clear. The sheriff, once a figure of authority and reassurance, had vanished without a trace. Rumors swirled, last seen investigating the very disturbances now shadowing Emma's life. Emma's thoughts spiraled. Was his disappearance a warning? Or had he fallen victim to the same darkness they faced? The weight of that question pressed hard, squeezing the breath from her lungs. Jessie's small hand trembled in hers as they stood on the threshold of the woods, the line between safety and peril blurred beyond recognition. There was no turning back. The vanished sheriff was a grim sign that the forces they confronted were real, relentless, and hungry. Emma's reliance on Max deepened. His instincts were now their only compass in the encroaching night. Suddenly, Max halted, body freezing like a statue. His eyes, usually so calm and intelligent, flared wide as they locked onto a dark shape moving silently between the twisted trunks. Emma's breath caught. She followed his gaze but saw only shifting shadows, the soft rustle of leaves disturbed by something unseen. A cold chill snaked down her spine. The air grew inexplicably colder, the forest holding a breath it couldn't release. A low growl vibrated from Max's throat, a sound thick with warning and primal fear. Then, from the depths of the darkness, a form emerged, a silhouette that seemed to absorb light itself. It moved with unnatural grace, an ephemeral wraith weaving between trees, its presence twisting the air around it. Emma's heart hammered fiercely. This was no figment of imagination. It was the darkness they had been fearing, the ancient evil whispered about in hushed legends. Max barked sharply, a sound filled with defiance and unyielding loyalty. He planted himself firmly, a living shield between Emma and the spectral menace. For a heartbeat, the world held still, the boundary between the tangible and the terrifying dissolving in the shadows. The dark entity coalesced from the shadows, its form shifting like smoke twisted by an unseen hand. Its eyes, voids of endless black, fixed on Emma, hungry and merciless. The oppressive silence was shattered by Max's fierce growl, his muscles rippling beneath his thick coat as he stepped forward. Max's teeth bared in a snarl, his stance defiant despite the overwhelming aura of dread. He stood between Emma and the malevolent force, his eyes burning with unwavering courage. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as the air thickened with raw energy, power older than time itself, pressing down like a storm. The entity moved closer, a slow, deliberate advance that spoke of ancient pain and unrelenting hunger. Max met its approach with a growl that rolled like thunder, his body trembling with the intensity of the moment. The space between protector and predator crackled with supernatural tension, each waiting for the other to make the first move. Emma's breath caught in her throat, torn between terror and awe. Max wasn't just fighting for their lives, he was fighting for their very souls. As the first clash began, Max's loyalty became a beacon of hope, illuminating the darkness with raw, undying love. With a burst of primal energy, Max lunged at the entity, teeth snapping through the thickening shadows. The creature recoiled but retaliated, unleashing a wave of dark, suffocating energy that struck Max squarely. Emma's scream tore through the night as Max staggered but refused to fall. His body absorbed the brunt of the attack, muscles straining, eyes blazing with fierce determination. Despite the overwhelming force pressing against him, Max fought on, every growl, every snap a testament to his unbreakable bond with Emma and Jesse. Emma reached out, tears streaming, desperate to pull him back from the brink, but Max's resolve was ironclad. He bore the darkness for them, his sacrifice shielding them from a fate too terrible to imagine. In that harrowing moment, love became their strongest weapon. Max's sacrifice was not just a shield but a declaration. No evil would claim them while he stood guard. Emma's sobs mingled with the echoes of battle as she understood the full measure of his loyalty. The entity's form dissolved into tendrils of shadow, retreating into the blackness of the woods with a final, chilling whisper. "It's not over." The words hung in the air, a dark promise etched into the night. Max, battered but unbroken, collapsed at Emma's feet, his heavy breathing ragged yet steady. His eyes, though weary, held a fierce light, a silent vow to protect them still. Emma knelt beside him, the weight of relief mingling with an unshakable dread. The battle was won, for now, but the war was far from over. The woods grew silent again, but the memory of the entity's voice lingered, a spectral reminder that the shadows would return. Max's sacrifice had bought them time, but Emma knew the darkness would come back, stronger and hungrier. Emma cradled Max's head in her hands, trembling as tears streamed down her cheeks. His fur was matted with dirt and blood, his body bruised but alive. She whispered broken promises, gratitude pouring from her heart. "You saved us, miss. You're my hero." Jesse watched silently, his young eyes wide with fear and awe. Though he didn't fully grasp the depth of the moment, he felt the bond, a connection forged in sacrifice and love. Max's gaze met Emma's, unwavering and filled with trust. He asked for nothing but her presence, his strength a lifeline in the overwhelming darkness. Emma's grief mingled with fierce determination. The weight of Max's sacrifice pressed on her, but so did the unbreakable bond that had become her anchor. In that quiet moment, amid pain and uncertainty, Emma found a fierce resolve to face whatever was coming. As Emma, Jesse, and Max began their slow retreat from the woods, the chilling echo of the entity's voice trailed after them, a sinister murmur threading through the trees. "It's not over." The words wrapped around Emma's heart, cold and unrelenting. The threat remained, a shadow lurking beyond the edge of sight. She tightened her grip on Max's leash, feeling his quiet strength steady her shaking hands. This battle was just the beginning. The darkness would return, but so would they, stronger, united, and ready. Emma's fear was tempered by a newfound resolve. Whatever awaited them, she would stand firm, alongside the dog who had given everything to protect her. The weary trio, Emma, Jesse, and Max, stepped slowly back onto the familiar porch of the farmhouse. The golden light of a late afternoon sun softened the weathered wood and stained glass windows, bathing the home in an almost ethereal glow. The tense air that had gripped the house for months seemed to dissolve, replaced by a fragile quietness that hummed with tentative peace. Emma's heart ached with a bittersweet relief. The battlefield was behind them, yet the scars were fresh, invisible echoes imprinted on the walls and floorboards. Her eyes lingered on the spot near the back porch where Max had faced down darkness itself. The memory was vivid, a shadow of loss, but also of hard-won survival. Max settled beside her feet, his heavy breathing a steady drum of resilience. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a prison of fear, but a fortress reclaimed. Emma whispered softly, "We made it home." And in that quiet moment, their victory was both silent and profound. Inside the softly lit kitchen, the scent of antiseptic mingled with the earthy aroma of fresh herbs Emma had placed by the windowsill. Max lay on a thick blanket, his eyes half closed, breathing steady but slow. Emma gently cleaned the bruises along his flank, her fingers tracing the scars left by the night's battle. Each touch was reverent, a silent thank you. Jesse hovered nearby, a tentative smile breaking through his solemn expression as he reached out to stroke Max's ears. "You're the bravest dog ever, Max," he whispered, his voice small but sincere. Emma watched them both, feeling a swell of gratitude and love. This was more than recovery. It was healing woven through moments of quiet care and shared tenderness. Max's strength was not just physical but spiritual, a symbol of the bond that had carried them through darkness. She knew the journey wasn't over. Max's wounds might fade, but the emotional weight of his sacrifice would linger. Yet with every passing day, hope seeped back into their lives, a fragile bloom nurtured by unwavering loyalty. The town hall was crowded with murmurs and cautious glances, the air thick with a mix of relief and unease. At the center stood the sheriff's deputy, his face weathered but resolute as he unveiled the evidence uncovered in dusty archives and forgotten files. Names, dates, missing persons, fragments pieced together into a dark mosaic that had haunted the town for generations. Emma listened, heart pounding as the veil lifted on decades of silence and cover-ups. The farmhouse, once whispered about in fearful tones, was revealed as the epicenter of tragedies long swept under the rug to protect the town's reputation. Old fears collided with new truths, igniting heated debates and tearful reckonings. Some neighbors averted their eyes, unwilling to confront the grim past, while others nodded grimly, ready at last to face the darkness that had stolen so many lives. Emma's chest tightened with a mixture of rage and sorrow. Justice was finally in motion, but the wounds ran deep. The sacrifices of those lost, and of Max, who had become their living guardian, were now a beacon calling the community to heal, to remember, and to rebuild. Late one afternoon, Emma sat on the porch steps, the fading sunlight painting the sky in hues of amber and violet. The house, once a monument to loss, now felt like a sanctuary reclaimed through pain and perseverance. She held a worn photograph in her hands, a reminder of a life forever altered. Her thoughts drifted back to the early days of widowhood, the unbearable silence, the hollow ache of absence. But standing beside her was a new reality, a survivor forged through trauma, resilience hard-won in the fires of fear and hope. Max lay curled at her feet, his steady breathing a rhythm grounding her to the present. Jessie's laughter echoed faintly from inside, a testament to new beginnings. Emma's grief had not vanished, it had transformed. The weight of loss was now tempered by the fierce determination to protect what remained, to cherish what was rebuilt. She whispered to the dusk, "I'm still here. We're still here." In that moment, Emma embraced her strength, not just as a grieving widow but as a woman reborn through love, loss, and the unbreakable bond with the dog who never left her side. The farmhouse breathed differently now. The creaks and groans of old timber had softened into a comforting chorus, a lullaby woven through the walls. Curtains fluttered gently in the breeze, and the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the earthy aroma of the garden. Emma moved through the rooms with renewed purpose, touching the familiar surfaces with reverence. Where shadows once lurked, sunlight now spilled freely. Max padded alongside her, relaxed yet vigilant, his once tense muscles softened by the calm. The restless pacing and sharp growls had faded into peaceful companionship. The house was no longer a vessel of fear but a canvas of hope, a reflection of the healing Emma and her family had fought so hard to achieve. She paused by the window, gazing out at the horizon where the first stars twinkled softly. The home had been a mirror to her soul's journey, and now it reflected peace, a sanctuary carved from the ashes of the past. As night deepened, Emma settled into her favorite chair, a worn quilt draped over her knees. Max curled at her feet, his warm body a steady anchor in the quiet room. The fireplace crackled softly, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls. Emma reached down, running her fingers through Max's thick fur, each stroke a wordless expression of gratitude. "You saved us," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. Max's eyes met hers, calm, trusting, full of a silent promise. He shifted closer, resting his head lightly against her hand, grounding them both in the stillness. In this shared quiet, the enormity of their journey pressed gently but persistently against Emma's heart. Max was more than a protector. He was family, a living testament to love's endurance. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only this peaceful connection, a bond forged in hardship, sealed by sacrifice. Emma's breath slowed, her soul soothed by the presence of the dog who had fought beside her through darkness, and who now walked with her into the light. A sudden gust slipped through the cracked window pane, carrying with it a faint, almost inaudible whisper that fluttered through the house like a fragile breath. Emma paused, eyes narrowing as the words teased her ears, indistinct yet unmistakably there. The voice, a remnant of the past, was both a warning and a promise, an echo of histories not yet fully laid to rest. She looked around the quiet room, heart pounding with a mixture of dread and acceptance. The house still held secrets, shadows not entirely banished. But Emma no longer feared the whispers. Max stirred beside her, alert yet calm, his presence a shield against the lingering shadows. The past would always be with them, a silent companion in their new beginning. And Emma was ready. The dawn spilled soft gold across the horizon as Emma stepped onto the porch, Max faithfully at her side. The cool morning air filled her lungs with crisp clarity, a tangible reminder of survival and renewal. Her gaze stretched across the land, a patchwork of healing fields and whispering trees that had witnessed her journey. She felt the strength within, a quiet power born not of conquest but of endurance. The road ahead was uncertain, but Emma's spirit burned bright with hope and resolve. Every scar, every tear, every moment of fear had forged her into someone stronger, someone ready to face the unknown. Max nudged her hand gently, grounding her to the present. Together, they embodied a promise that even in the darkest times, loyalty and courage could light the way. Emma turned back toward the house, her heart steady. "We're ready," she said softly, "not just to survive, but to thrive." The camera pulls away slowly from the farmhouse porch, where Emma, Jessie, and Max stand united beneath a sky painted with the warm hues of sunset. The golden light casts long, soft shadows as the wind stirs the leaves, carrying with it the scent of earth and possibility. Max stands tall, alert but at peace, his eyes scanning the horizon, a guardian ever watchful. Jesse laughs softly, his hand entwined in Emma's, their faces glowing with the quiet strength of survival. The house behind them, once a fortress of fear, now breathes life as a home filled with love and hope. The scene lingers on this tableau of resilience and rebirth, three souls bound by courage, loyalty, and the promise of tomorrow. A final soft breeze whispers through the trees, as if nature itself acknowledges their victory and the new beginnings awaiting them. The golden hour sunlight filtered softly through the kitchen window, casting long, warm beams across the hardwood floor. Emma sat quietly at the table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug, eyes distant yet focused. Memories of their ordeal danced just beneath the surface, fear, hope, and that unbreakable thread of loyalty woven through every moment. Max lay at her feet, his presence a silent reminder of the countless times he had stood guard, unwavering, ready to shield her and Jessie from unseen dangers. His sacrifice, beyond the physical wounds, spoke to something deeper, an instinctual courage that transcended words. Emma's thoughts drifted inward, revisiting the nights filled with dread when Max's growls echoed louder than any human voice. She understood now, loyalty was not merely companionship. It was trust built on instinct, sacrifice without hesitation, and courage born from love. With a soft sigh, Emma whispered to herself, "He taught me what it means to protect without question, to love without condition." The weight of that realization settled in her chest like a sacred vow, binding her forever to the dog who had given everything so she could live. The evening was wrapped in gentle shadows, the fireplace casting a flickering glow that warmed the cozy living room. Emma sank into the worn armchair, exhaustion settling into her bones but her spirit steadied by Max's comforting presence. He rested his massive head on her lap, his breath slow and even, a balm for her restless mind. Outside, the wind whispered softly through the trees, but inside, there was only this quiet haven, a world stripped of fear for just a little while. Emma's fingers traced slow circles along Max's thick fur, a tactile prayer of thanks for the steadfast guardian who had never faltered. She could feel his heartbeat beneath her hand, a rhythm both steady and fierce, the pulse of loyalty itself. In this silent exchange, words were unnecessary. Max's gentle sigh told stories of battles fought and love fiercely defended. Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears, overwhelmed by the depth of their connection, a bond that had carried her through the darkest storms. Jessie's laughter floated from the next room, a fragile reminder of innocence preserved. Emma smiled softly, grateful for this fragile peace, knowing that in Max's quiet companionship lay the strength to face whatever might come next. For a moment, all was right in the world. Here, in the warmth of the firelight and the presence of her dog, Emma found a sanctuary for her heart. The days since the confrontation had been a slow dance of healing. Max, once battle-worn and weary, now moved with renewed vigor, the glint of life returning to his eyes, the strength flowing back into his limbs. Emma watched him with a mixture of pride and tenderness. His recovery was not just physical but emotional, a reflection of the resilience that she too was rediscovering within herself. Their journeys mirrored each other, a shared narrative of endurance against odds that once seemed insurmountable. Where Max had once trembled in pain, he now stood tall and alert, a sentinel reborn. Emma's grief had softened into determination, her sorrow tempered by the fierce love that had been her anchor. She traced the lines of Max's face, remembering the nights when hope felt like a distant star. Now, with each wag of his tail, each gentle nudge, Max reminded her that survival was not enough. They could thrive. Together, they were stronger, forged in fire and bound by a loyalty that transcended words. Emma smiled, knowing that this strength would carry them into a future shaped by hope, courage, and love. Emma sat in the quiet of the study, a journal open on her lap. The pages held the raw truth of her journey, from the moment they arrived at the farmhouse, through the nights steeped in fear, to the battles fought both seen and unseen. Her mind sifted through lessons etched deeply into her soul, trusting instincts, even when they whispered truths too frightening to face. Allowing herself to grieve fully, yet not letting sorrow define her. Recognizing that courage often meant staying, not fleeing. She thought of Max, the embodiment of silent strength, and how animals, in their simplicity and wisdom, taught humans profound truths. Love without condition, loyalty without hesitation, protection without fail. The darkness that once haunted their lives had revealed something unexpected, the unyielding light of connection. Emma closed the journal gently, a sense of closure mingled with new beginnings. The scars remained, but they were now the map of a journey traveled with bravery. She spoke softly to the empty room. Sometimes, the greatest battles are fought not in the open, but in the heart. Her reflection was not just an end. It was a declaration of resilience and a tribute to those quiet heroes who walk beside us, unseen but never absent. In the final moments, Emma turned her gaze to the camera, eyes steady and voice heartfelt. There are countless Maxes out there, she began, animals who stand as silent guardians in our lives, often unnoticed, their bravery unrecognized. She spoke of shelters filled with dogs waiting for a chance to love, to protect, to heal. These animals give everything without asking for more than a safe place and a kind heart. Her words carried the weight of experience, a plea born from the intimate knowledge of sacrifice and loyalty. Please, consider supporting animal rescue organizations. Help give these silent heroes a voice, a home, and the love they deserve. Emma's expression softened, a smile touching her lips. Because sometimes, the quietest heroes make the biggest difference. Her call was a bridge between story and action. A reminder that every act of kindness reverberates beyond the screen and into real lives. The room dimmed as Emma's voice softened, carrying a final truth. The greatest heroes aren't always the loudest. Often, they don't wear medals or shout from rooftops. They stand quietly beside us, their loyalty unwavering. She looked down at Max, now resting peacefully, a silhouette against the fading light. In their silent presence lies strength, steadfast love that endures without question, protection that never falters. Emma's smile was gentle but resolute, filled with gratitude for the dog who had changed her life. We don't always see their battles, but their courage is woven into every moment they share with us. Her words lingered, a tribute to the quiet champions who walk through life on four paws, teaching us about love, sacrifice, and resilience. The camera pulled back slowly, capturing Emma and Max standing side by side on the porch. The fading sun painted the sky in soft pastels, casting a serene glow over the peaceful farmhouse. Jessie's laughter echoed faintly from the garden, a joyful contrast to the shadows that had once loomed. Max stood alert but calm, his eyes reflecting a fierce yet gentle vigilance. Emma reached down to squeeze his paw, their bond unspoken but unbreakable. The house, once a symbol of fear and loss, now stood as a monument to resilience and rebirth. As the camera widened to embrace the landscape, the sprawling fields, the whispering trees, hope blossomed like the first light of dawn. Together, they faced the future, uncertain but unbroken. As the screen faded slowly to black, Emma's voice echoed one last time. In the end, the greatest heroes aren't always the loudest. Sometimes, it's the quiet ones who make the biggest difference. The final image lingered, a steadfast German shepherd standing tall beside Emma, the embodiment of silent loyalty and fierce love. Her words hung in the air like a promise, a tribute to the unseen warriors who guard our hearts. The story closed not with a roar but a whisper, a reminder that courage is often found in the quietest moments and the most devoted companions.